Wonderful. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lars Nykstedt. I'm the policy director here at Isaiah. We're a statewide faith-based organization working for racial and economic justice in Minnesota. And I'm proud to co-chair the Minnesotans for Paid Family Leave campaign for the past 3 years, along with the Children's Defense Fund and the Minnesota AFL-CIO. This is my first ever webinar, and I am old enough to have brought a typewriter to college, so please bear with me because this is all stressful for an old guy like me. We're delighted to welcome the legislators, candidates, and staff who have registered for this webinar today from every corner of the state, and hopefully you'll all leave with a better understanding on the why, the what, and the how of paid family leave. So to kick us off, one thing we like to say in the campaign for paid family leave is that everyone has a story. And without going into a lot of detail, I have my own stories about paid family leave. Both of my daughters, when they were born, I was fortunate to take several weeks off and bond with them. And then my mother had cancer, was diagnosed a year ago, and then it came back aggressively this spring. And thanks to generous paid sick days policy of my employer, I was able to take much of her last 3 weeks alive with her when she was in home hospice care. We work with a lot of clergy, obviously, at Isaiah, who name this as sacred time. And that's really true to me. That time with my mother on her final days was super sacred and special. And so I was really grateful for that. So it's very personal to me. I think it's very personal to a lot of people. Everybody has some connection to the need for paid family leave. So I'm really honored to be able to advocate for such an important policy. And so what we're going to do now is hear a couple of other stories to ground us in the needs for paid family leave. First, we'll hear from Kim Hooley, who's in this picture here and joining us, I think, by phone.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for participating today. My name is Kim Hooley. I am a child of God, but I'm also the child of Victor and Carol Matson. While growing up, my parents modeled that faith and family come first. They demonstrated that with the care of their elderly parents. In 1991, my father was diagnosed with a cancerous brain tumor. While my dad endured months of radiation and chemotherapy, he kept a bell near his bed or chair so that if he needed anything, he just had to ring that bell and someone in the house or yard could hear him and respond. My mom and her 3 daughters, along with help from hospice, were able to answer that bell and respond to him day or night. We juggled our schedules, and it was tough. We put our personal lives on hold because we were raised to believe that families take care of families. Now, 27 years later, I still have this bell, along with the cherished memories of that time and the loving care that we were able to give my dad in his final days. I've demonstrated this to my children, that families must be able to care for each other, whether it's a dying parent or a child fighting an illness. But these days, when I look at that bell in my curio cabinet, I wonder with anxiety and despair, who is going to answer my bell? Our boys are grown and busy establishing themselves independently. But if my family encountered a major medical crisis tomorrow, I worry about them having to choose between caring for a loved one or paying their bills. Caring for each other is what we are called to do by our Creator. We must work together to prepare all of Minnesota for the question, who is going to answer your bell? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim, for sharing that powerful testimony and your personal story. Now we're going to hear from a business owner. The ability to offer paid family leave is a huge issue for many small businesses. And so Jason Rathy, who's joining us also by phone, will be sharing a few words. If I can figure out how to. Oh, great. Super.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Kim, for that story. That was really powerful. I own a small business in Northeast Minneapolis, a landscaping business. And as a business owner, I think we always have to keep in mind that people work to live. And I think all business owners, no matter where they come from, political spectrum or otherwise, take great pride in the ability to offer people employment, which allows them to live the life and the values that they want to live. And so, but practically speaking, with providing people that opportunity on the birth of their sons and daughters can be really difficult, especially for small businesses. We started out with, 5 or 6 employees, all in their 20s. None of us had kids, and now we have 25 employees and 18 total kids. And out of our 25 employees, we have 10 women, and we do offer maternity leave. And for us, that can come randomly and, may cost us for a given person, maybe $3,000 or something like that. But it's you never know when that's going to hit. And so as a business owner, there's nothing that ties business owners together more than the fear of the future. And what you always have in your head is, how many unexpected things can I take at once? Profit-wise, we may have a year that we make 115,000. We may have a year that we make negative 15,000. And you just never know when those things are going to happen, when the economy is going to change. And so what I really desire as a business owner is to be able to know what I have. And I'd much rather, so with paid family leave, I'd much rather pay, $2 a month or whatever per employee or something like that over a length of time, so that I know what that cost is, rather than what would happen if I had all of a sudden had 2 employees that were lucky enough to enter into that, important part of their life. That would be all of a sudden a really big issue to our company, especially if we were having a year where a couple other things were happening. We're buying a building now, we're doing other things. And I just think that it's really hard. We just don't have the scale that a big business would to be able to take those costs and balance them out. So I think that as a business owner, what I would just really like, I think all of us believe that the ability to care for your family in the important, times, the beginnings and the ends, is what life is all about. And as business owner, I just would really like the ability to take those costs and kind of put them over a longer length of time and make them more consistent.
Super. Thank you, Jason. And now it's Corinne. Go.
Thanks, Jason. I'm Corinne from Main Street Alliance, and thanks a lot, Jason, for being on. I just want to say that Jason's experience is not unique. I've talked to business owners across the state who completely support this program. We do a store-to-store survey, and in 2016, we surveyed 1,500 businesses nationwide and found that 64%, including 76% of businesses, of women-owned businesses and businesses of color, support passing a federal paid family and medical leave bill. However, 84% could not afford to offer paid leave on their own, like Jason said. And one reason, besides valuing their employees for the overwhelming support, is because paid family leave helps level the playing field between small businesses and large corporations. We have a really tight labor market, and it's extremely difficult for small businesses to match generous benefit packages offered by large corporations. So our businesses are at a huge hiring disadvantage and lose employees. They lose employees to large corporations who can provide those benefits. So when employers abide by the same rules, they level the playing field for small businesses. It also provides critical financial security for small business owners themselves. Our business owners have babies, they have ailing parents, and they can't afford to take unpaid leave for themselves. Their cushions are razor thin, and a single accident could jeopardize the health of a small business. So, yeah.
Super. You're covering those. Okay, great. we were just going to see if we could set up the screen here so that we can also kind of see what you're seeing other than just the slideshow. Janae, are you nearby? Okay, she stepped away. Okay, well, I think we're just continuing on, and now Stephanie Hoganson from Children's Defense Fund.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us today to have this important discussion. My name is Stephanie Hoganson, and I'm the Outreach Director at Children's Defense Fund Minnesota, one of the co-chairs for the Minnesotans for Paid Family and Medical Leave Coalition. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits of paid family and medical leave. I think to start, as you can see on this slide, this is some polling data from 2016 that really shows that this is a very important issue to voters and to voters across all political spectrums. This poll showed that whether you're Republican, Democrat, or independent across the state, Minnesotans value paid family and medical leave for the variety of reasons indicated in this chart. And the issue is, of course, an important one in this upcoming election, as a majority of voters say they would be more likely to support a candidate who is in favor of creating a paid family and medical leave fund. And so we hope that those on the call take that to heart and start to understand how we can address this issue. And particularly the reason we need to do this now is because over the past several decades, the way we work and live has significantly changed. More workers face challenges trying to meet the often overlapping demands of family, personal, and work responsibilities. And the data here kind of takes a snapshot of what Minnesota families are experiencing. So most parents are employed, and most households have both parents or caregivers in the household in the workforce. So about 3/4 of Minnesota children have all available parents in the workforce. And that carries over to caregivers as well. So 90% of older adults receiving long-term care in the community rely on unpaid family care. So this issue reaches all families in every corner of the state, and we have an increasing need to alleviate their increasing fear and stress for who's going to answer their bell, as Kim so eloquently described. A strong majority of Minnesotans face challenges when managing those responsibilities, and this is kind of across workers from all types of work. About 63% of full-time workers and 67% of part-time workers said they would be likely to face significant economic hardship if they had to take time from their jobs without pay to care for a new child or a seriously ill loved one or deal with their own health issues. So we're leaving Minnesotans with very challenging decisions between family and economic hardship. And of course, as many people know around this issue, the US is an outlier in that we haven't figured out a way to address this problem for our citizens. The US is the only advanced economy without paid maternity leave, sick leave, or vacation days. And we're one of 9 without paid paternity leave. And globally, countries and governments have approached solving this problem with a social insurance model that has some combination of employee, employer, and government contributions. So being all in it together. And because we haven't figured out a way to address this problem, the majority of workers do not have access to paid family and medical leave. So 60 to 75% of workers have access to some paid sick days, about 7 on average. But these are quickly used up in the face of a major FMLA event. And of course, FMLA might allow you to keep your job, but it doesn't mean that you have to receive some sort of paycheck, which is the tough choice that families have to face in these important times in their life. And then we also, in a study that Minnesota did, found that there are significant disparities by racial and ethnic, geography, earning levels, work schedules, and age when looking at who actually has access to paid leave. The few who do, there's many disparities in that number as well. So a paid family and medical leave insurance program would have economic and social benefits that not only would strengthen family economic security and remove those difficult barriers and decisions from families during difficult times in their lives, but also enhance worker and family health and well-being, benefit business, and grow a robust economy for all of us. A paid family and medical leave insurance program would strengthen family and economic stability. The research shows by increasing labor force participation and employee retention. So moderate leaves of 10 to 25 weeks are associated with higher labor force participation rates among women, research shows. And then paid leave increases the probability that workers will return to a job. Research has also shows that it reduces reliance on public assistance programs. So women who took paid maternity leave were about 40% less likely to receive public assistance the year following their child's birth than women who did not take paid leave. And overall, it increases lifetime earnings and retirement security, especially among women. So the benefits are in the individual family, local communities, and our state and government as a whole. And additionally, there are positive effects on parental, child, and family well-being that, when looked at individually, impact maybe an individual, but over time, these benefits listed here can have a significant compounding effect on child outcomes and family and individual outcomes. So you can see the list here, but I'll note a few. Paid family leave strengthens infant brain development, increases the role of dads, improves some health outcomes, maternal and infant health outcomes, lowers racial health disparities, and improves family instability, and reduces inequality among the populations that don't have access to leave through their employer. So ultimately, the status quo carries a really significant price tag for all of us, for families, communities, businesses, and the economy. When we make it impossible for workers to be responsible workers and family members, we know we're not providing a critical resource for our society as a whole. Overall, workers give up nearly $1 billion a year in Minnesota if they take unpaid leave, and that money could be used to pay their bills, buy groceries, support families, and all of that, of course, is an economic boost to our local economies. Businesses, of course, incur significant costs, as already been mentioned, to replace talented and experienced employees. If fathers don't have access to paid leave, it can prevent important bonding time that improves outcomes for children. And then, of course, when families or workers are forced to quit their job or take significant income loss to care for a loved one or themselves or a new baby, and they turn to work support programs or public assistance benefits, that is something that increases cost to the state, and paid family and medical leave could prevent if it was available to them. And then work shortages, of course, are exacerbated when women or others are fired to take on responsibility for their families. So a common sense solution to this complex issue would touch all of our lives, and I'll turn it over to Deb to kind of talk about what that might look like.
Hello, everybody. I'm Deb Fitzpatrick. I co-direct the Center on Women, Gender, and Public Policy at the Humphrey School at the University of Minnesota. And I led the research team that undertook the legislatively funded study to look at how Minnesota could best design and implement a program that provided wage replacement to workers while on FMLA leaves. Based on this study and backed up by the coalition presenting the webinar today, which will be discussed more a little bit later by Lars, a bill was introduced in Minnesota that provided up to 12 weeks of partial wage replacement during pregnancy and medical leaves, and another potential 12 weeks during family leaves. This program would replace 80 to 55% of wages based on income, up to a cap of about 2/3 or about $1,000. The average worker would receive about 2/3 of their wages replaced during their leave. So I think it's already been mentioned there that some people, including Lars, were able to take some sick leave to manage these situations now. And there is a lot of confusion about how paid family and medical leave is different from sick leave. I think it's important to acknowledge that paid family and medical leave is really designed to kick in after most workers would exhaust average amounts of paid sick leave. And as was mentioned earlier, that's about 7 days on average across workers. And this sick leave usually covers more routine and shorter duration illnesses. Again, shorter things around a week or less. And while some sick leave laws mandate that employers provide these modest levels of paid leave for a worker and their family member's short-term illness, the social insurance model that spreads these costs and benefits of longer-term paid leave across all, ensuring that no one employer or worker has to manage these significant costs alone. So again, in terms of the study, we really looked at the significant body of research and looked at a variety of options. This research suggests some important principles for a paid family and medical leave policy or program that maximizes the benefits, especially for small businesses and underserved workers, and minimizes costs. And these policy principles include things like covering all employers and workers, wherever they work, regardless of the business size, covering workers when they change jobs. So we know workers change jobs regularly, and if they are it's dependent on a particular employer, that can cause issues around access. That it should be gender neutral, and we talked about the benefits to both men and women earlier. It should be available for broad leave purposes. A lot of times we talk about maternity and paternity leave, and it's really critically important, but people have needs for these leaves across the life spectrum. Elder care is an increasingly important issue for many families, as well as the needs of older children, spouses, other kinds of caregiving needs. So it's really important that we are looking at all of the needs for leave, not just paternity and maternity leave. Benefits need to be calibrated to maximize uptake across all income levels, and I would also say for both men and women. It's important that there's job protection while people are taking leave, otherwise the program will not be accessible for some workers, and that we need a sustainable funding mechanism and source for startup. And then finally, inclusive definitions of family help make sure that all of our workers are able to take advantage of such a program. So as has been mentioned already, we studied as part of this legislatively mandated study, we looked at a variety of approaches. Our study team considered things like tax incentives or mandates, employer mandates, such as the kind of approach that's taken for workers' compensation. And we recommended, based again on the kind of research that we were looking at, a very broad, long-term body of research, that the social insurance model would be the preferred method for Minnesota to address this issue of providing partial wage replacement for workers. And there was a number of reasons for that. First of all, it is the approach that is based on all the principles that we just outlined for a good policy. As mentioned earlier by Corinne, it levels the benefits playing field among smaller and larger employers, rural and urban communities. We know that rural communities actually have less access to these kind of benefits. And it helps then level that playing field for competition for the best workers, as Corinne said. It pools risk across every worker and employer, creating a shared responsibility that does not overburden some businesses more than others. And it's less likely to result in discrimination against workers that need to take these leaves. And as Corinne mentioned earlier, it is the preferred approach. 79% of small businesses said that a social insurance model would help them the most in a recent survey. So We know that 7 states now in the United States have adopted or implemented paid family and medical leave programs. And again, these programs have all adopted a social insurance model. This is the proven effective solution, not only in around the world, but also in, again, 7 states in the United States. And just to refresh people on what a social insurance model looks like, it's sort of similar to UI in the sense that programs are funded by payments made into a state insurance fund, often through a small payroll premium. Under the Minnesota bill, employers and employees would each contribute about 0.27% on earnings up to $118,000, which is the Social Security cap. And for a median worker, that equals about $1.75 per week. Now, workers become eligible based on an earnings history, and when eligible life events occur, that requires the worker to take a leave. They make a claim on the fund and receive a benefit from the fund. That frees up that money for the employer to make various efforts to replace the worker or to otherwise pay overtime, or otherwise helps that employer also be freed up from paying for that worker during the leave. Now, paid leave programs are built on existing unemployment insurance, UI, payroll tax, and data collection infrastructure, which minimizes the burden to workers and employers. So there's not a whole new kind of infrastructure necessary to set up in the 7 states that have adopted these programs. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lars, who's going to talk a little bit about the coalition and other efforts.
Thank you, Deb. So hopefully by now you have a pretty good sense of the why we need paid family and medical leave and what we're talking about when we talk about a statewide paid family and medical leave insurance program. So now let's talk about how we can get there and our efforts so far. So we put this coalition together about 4 years ago. Isaiah is a co-chair along with Children's Defense Fund Minnesota and AFL-CIO Minnesota, as I mentioned. We have grown to over 24 faith, community, business, and labor organizations, including AARP, Main Street Alliance, Minnesota Nurses Association, Take Action Minnesota, North Star Policy Institute, and several others. And we've come together around a set of principles. In short, those principles include that everybody should contribute and everybody should be able to benefit. We need to ensure adequate coverage for those who need it the most. It must be not only for mothers, but all parents, and not just for parents, but all family members who need it for whether it's their own medical leave or end-of-life care or care for a significantly ill loved one. This is part of our values, and we think is kind of pretty common value shared by everybody, that you take care of family when they need you most, and we should be supporting those values through our policy. In the past several years, we've organized dozens of public meetings, rallies, phone banks, state fair booth. We're doing this webinar now. There's more events that we'll be mentioning shortly. The bill was introduced in the 2015 legislative session. It was Representative Ryan Winkler of Golden Valley and Senator Katie Sieben of Cottage Grove that were the lead authors of that. In that year, this is the funding that Deb referred to conduct an implementation analysis. The Department of Employment and Economic Development contracted with the University of Minnesota to produce this 200-page comprehensive reports that Deb Fitzpatrick was the lead author on. If you're interested, we can certainly get you a link to that study. It's been an incredibly helpful resource for looking at options for designing and implementing paid family leave. In 2016, a bill based on many of these recommendations passed the Minnesota Senate after 5 committee stops, and it became a part of the omnibus tax bill. This was authored by Senator Susan Kent, who we're fortunate to have on the webinar with us today, as well as Representative Jason Metza. However, unfortunately, the Minnesota House failed to even give the bill a hearing in 2016, And since then, the bill has been reintroduced, but has not been heard in either chamber. So we're continuing to push for that. Earlier this spring, in our efforts to continue organizing and educating the public and elected officials, Isaiah was part of a care canvas in St. Cloud. We canvassed the community and found that family care is a major issue for voters, regardless of party affiliation. There were 400 conversations with registered voters on the doors, and 84% shared a struggle they face with family care. 88% would like to see family care addressed in the elections, and 80% said they would be more likely to vote for a candidate who supports solutions to care issues. So as you've seen, and I'm sure as you're hearing, as you talk to people across the state, paid family leave really does resonate with voters. And we think that the messages that most resonate with voters include some of these. Obviously, I think the thing that resonates the most is when people share their own stories, as I led off this webinar with my own story. I think that's, if you have a personal story you can share and connect with people to let them know that you really understand this issue, that's the most powerful. Small business concerns are very real, and we're involving small business owners to address those concerns in the proposed legislation. And this is a way to level the playing field for small businesses to support their workers and compete with some of the larger Fortune 500 companies that already offer more generous benefits because they have the resources to do so. We think all workers and employers should be treated equally, so workers and small business owners can be there for their family and not experience this economic instability. And obviously workers across a lifespan need support and experience financial hardship when they have to take leave from a job to care for a family member. This has been covered well in the Star Tribune and other media outlets about the caregiving crisis with aging parents, with childcare. It's kind of all ends of the lifespan. So in terms of some of the upcoming events we have planned, there's a feature film called 0 Weeks, which is a very beautifully produced documentary feature with a lot of people's stories about paid family leave from around the country. We're planning a debut premiere in Minnesota of this film with Simpson Housing Services in Minneapolis, tentatively scheduled for October 4th. Deb Fitzpatrick is working on a study of the rural aspects of paid family and medical leave, and there will be a convening to bring policymakers, local officials, business owners, agricultural folks, and others together in greater Minnesota this fall as well. Here is our contact information. The three of us who presented on this, we can also put you in touch with Deb if you have more detailed questions about research, but please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're very excited to work with legislators, candidates, and staff and others in crafting and passing a strong statewide paid family and medical leave insurance program.